Hello everyone, myself Vijay Narayan Singh, welcoming you all on this platform. Today we are here to discuss the question paper of the examination conducted by UPSC, that is Civil Services Preliminary Examination 2020, which was scheduled on 4th October. Students, I am here to discuss the one of the segment of the GS paper 1, that is Indian polity, constitution and governance. Let's look into some points before going through the questions. Number 1, that is this year UPSC has asked 17 question out of 100 question for Indian constitution, polity and governance. Secondly, these 17 questions we can classify into easy questions, moderate questions and some tough questions. Some 4 to 5 questions were of easy in nature, whereas 9 to 10 questions were of moderate in nature and some 2 to 3 questions were tough in nature. Tough in sense that is we can say that is explanation is required, interpretation is required. So let's move on towards the question so that we can discuss in totality. Again, post this discussion we will be going through what could be the expected cutoff for this year and what would be the role of Indian polity, constitution and governance in that cutoff. It's going to be one of the important segment also. It's going to prove one of the important section because it does shares the lion's share in that portion, in the entire GS paper 1 portion. Okay. So 17 questions, let's take it one by one in the classified manner, simple to moderate and then to tough in nature. Beside this, in the meantime, we will be also focusing that what is the source of this question, okay, and again so that the upcoming examination and the students who wish to appear in this examination can also prepare accordingly. Okay, so it's going to be beneficial for those who has given this examination or who are planning to give this examination in their coming futures. Okay, so let's take it one by one. Let's go to the very first question, that is question number 81. I am discussing the series C series of this examination, and in that polity 2 starts from question 81. Okay, the question says that a parliamentary system of government is one in which we have to focus upon this, that is the parliamentary system of government. Okay, so we know that there are two types of government, presidential form of government and the parliamentary form of government, and we have to concentrate upon the parliamentary system of government. We have to identify the nature of the parliamentary system of government. Let's first move towards the options given and then we will come to the answer. The very first says that, again we'll have to make it point that which statement is the correct statement. Number A, it says that all political parties in the parliament are represented in the government. Second B statement, the government is responsible to the parliament and can be removed by it. The third says that the government is elected by the people and can be removed by them. And the fourth statement is the government is chosen by the parliament but cannot be removed by it before completion of a fixed term. So to point it out the correct statement, let's first have a brief discussion. Okay, number 1, that is we know that democracy, this democracy has been classified into two types. Number 1, direct democracy and indirect democracy. The very example of direct democracy seems to be referendum, then plebiscite and recall system. The sense direct democracy means where the role of the citizen of that nation is directly in the government. Okay, whatsoever the government do, they do directly on the advice of the citizen of this nation, of that nation. Okay. Whereas in context to indirect democracy, the indirect democracy is followed by representative democracy. Representative democracy. It means the government is being represented by the one who represents the citizen of that nation. It means citizens do not have the direct role in the government, but they elect, they appoint their representative who becomes the part of the government. And this representative government in democracy is also of two types, that is presidential form of government and the parliamentary form of government. This presidential form of government, we can say the examples like just like the government of United States of America. Here in presidential form of government, by name itself it is being clear that the president seems to be the head of the nation, head of the nation as well as the government. But when it comes to the parliamentary form of government, here head of the government is president, where the head of the head of the nation is the president, where head of the government is the prime minister. Got the point? So we have to focus upon the government in the parliamentary system of government. So this prime minister is being appointed by the president of India. President of India do appoints only who is being elected by the party in majority in the parliament's lower house, that is Lok Sabha. The party who has gained majority in the Lok Sabha in the recent election, and the party itself chooses its leader, is being appointed as the prime minister by the president. Got the point? Okay. And now let's now move towards the options one by one. That is, all political parties in the parliament are represented in the government. No all party, only the parties who seems to be in majority in the Lok Sabha becomes the part of the government. So thus this statement is incorrect. Second, the government is responsible to the parliament and can be removed by it. Yes, the government is responsible to the parliament. There is a concept called the concept of the principles of collective responsibility. That is, the entire council of ministers who is headed by the prime minister and followed by the other minister, that is called the council of ministers. The council of ministers is collectively responsible towards the Lok Sabha in the parliament. Okay, so the government is responsible to the parliament and can be removed by it. And yes, the case if there that the concerned majority party lacks its majority in the Lok Sabha, has no right to remain in the government. Okay, so this statement is correct. Now see, the government is elected by the people and can be removed by them. Number one, the government is elected by the people. Okay, this up to this statement it is correct. But when it comes to the second within that statement, that can be removed by them, no, the people do not have the authority to remove the government. If they had the authority, it means that is the concept of recall system is there, and the recall system do prevalent in direct democracy. Thus, this C statement seems to be incorrect. Now, D1, that is, the government is chosen by the parliament but cannot be removed by it before completion of a fixed term. I said that the government seems to be in power up to the extent the government remains in majority. The moment the government is not in majority in lower house, that is n by 2 plus 1, the government do not have the right to remain single second within the house. Okay, so no fixed term tenure to be fixed over there, though there is a fixed term tenure of 5 years, but before the completion of that fixed years tenure, the government can be suspended by the President of India in case if it lacks its majority in the lower house, that is in the Lok Sabha. Thus, this statement is also incorrect. So, there is an analysis over here. So, we can keep this question in the moderate question. Okay. Earlier I said that is easy question, easy mode question, moderate question and tough in nature. So, we are going to keep in moderate because here is the analysis in that one. Got the point? I hope it must be clear. Thus, the answer will be B. Now, let us move on towards the other question. Now, the second question, that is question number 82, series C. Which part of the Constitution of India declares the ideals of welfare? Ideals of welfare, and the part we have to make it out. Okay. So, this question we are going to keep in easy question. Okay. Simply it has been mentioned that part 4 to the Constitution, part 4 to the Constitution do explains about the welfaristic connotation in the social format. Okay, for the sake of the society at the larger extent, the government must be welfare government. Okay, that is, the state should be welfare, so must go for the welfaristic orientation of its nature to we can say fulfill the ideas, ideologies and the goal of the citizen of this nation. Okay. Again, we can make it in touch with preamble over mentioned over there, but here it has been mentioned that in which part, that is the fourth part, and fourth is related with directive principles of the state policies, where the government makes plans and policies favoring the citizen of this nation. Okay, for the welfare of those peoples. So, simply it is an easy question, and that is directive principles of the state policies. Option A is correct. We will not have to rush for the other options, so that the this is not a time consuming question. Directly we can make it a point and we can save time over here. Got the point? Now, let us move on to the third one. Okay. Sorry. Now, let us move on to the third one, and over here let us have an analysis is required over here, and we will keep it in the moderate type of question. Now, let us move on. Consider the following statement. The statement says that we do have two statements over here. Number one, the Constitution of India defines its basic structure in terms of federalism, secularism, fundamental rights and democracy. Got the point over here? So, here the focus is what? In context to basic structure, and the Constitution of India defines. Nowhere in the Constitution the basic structure had been defined. The concept of basic structure has been introduced in the Constitution through a renowned case called Keswanand Bharti case 1973. On the basis of this case, the Supreme Court as a guardian of the Constitution came out that certain structure within the Constitution must be treated as the basic structure, and its ideology, its philosophy must not be changed, must not be altered at all. If it does, explains in negative connotations. It means if a change or the amendment is to be made in the Constitution, and if that change or amendments changes the very philosophy of that part in negative sense, it will not be allowed at any cost. But if that alteration enhances the philosophy of that structure, it will be welcomed. Okay. So, Nowhere it has been defined, but it has been introduced on the basis of the Keswanand Bharati case 1973. Recently, Keswanand Bharati demised was in news. Okay, so it comes to with the very concept that defines this statement is incorrect. So incorrect means one will not be there. So over here C and A option will be no more, only we have to go through option B and D. And it all depends upon the statement, second statement. The Constitution of India provides for judicial review to safeguard the citizens' liberties and to preserve the ideals on which the Constitution is based upon. Okay. Nowhere in the Constitution it has been mentioned that the Constitution has defined judicial review. It is simply saying that provides for judicial review. Yes, there is a provision mentioned in the Constitution yes, there is a provision mentioned in the Constitution, the concept called judicial review. Judicial review is one of the most important aspect in the judicial system in India and had been taken from the United States of America's Constitution. This judicial review, we know that we do have three organs of the Constitution, that is called legislative, executive and judiciary. And all these three organs are there to cross check each other, so that the state cannot become autocrat in nature. Each and every organ do have a check and balance on each other, but primarily the legislative and the executive do cross check each other, but they cannot cross check the functioning of the judiciary as being mentioned in Article 52 of the Constitution, that judiciary to be separated from the executive. Okay, so and one of the basic structure in context of judiciary is also there, that the judiciary to be independent and integrated. Independent with whom? Independent to legislature and executive. But yes, the judiciary can supervise on legislative and executive, being the guardian of this Constitution. So being the guardian of this Constitution, the judiciary has the power to review the policies, plans, the acts, articles made by the legislature and implemented by the executive. Got the point? And if it finds that it is against the constitutional norms, it to be treated as null and void from the immediate effect. Thus, and why to make it null and void? Only in sense to respect, to enhance the provisions granted to the citizens for their welfaristic orientations. Got the point? Thus, in citizens' welfare, the judiciary is there to check legislative and executive, so that the very rights, the very plans, policies of the government should not go against the citizen of this nation. Okay, so ideals on which the Constitution is based. Got the point? So judicial review is a safeguard to the citizens, Okay, safeguarding against the state activities in form of legislative or executive. Thus, the second statement seems to be correct one. Got the point? Okay, so the answer is 2 only. It's clear? I hope it must be clear. Now let's move on to the next question. And the question again is 85, and in that let's move on to there. In the context of India, which one of the following is the characteristics of appropriate for bureaucracy? Bureaucracy over here. That is, in earlier question we have came to that legislative, executive and judiciary. Got the point? Again we will have to make it the point. There are two type of executive. Number one, the temporary executives, and the number two is permanent executive. So here we are talking about this permanent executive. We will be talking about this permanent executive. In that sense, we will be taking these permanent executives are the selected one, and these are, why I am more classifying it, because it does have a relation with the temporary executive also, because this permanent executive do play their role under the supervision of this temporary executive. These temporary executive are the elected one for a fixed tenure of 5 years, and they are the part of the legislature. Being the part of the legislature, they are the policy maker, and the very purpose of these permanent executives are to implement the policies made by the legislatures, made by the temporary executive in the as a member of the legislature. So these permanent executives are to implement the plans and policies made by the temporary executive in the legislature, in the legislative assemblies. Okay, whether the union legislative assembly or the state legislative assembly. Okay, so let's move on to that. That bureaucracy as an agency for widening the scope of parliamentary democracy. Okay, so no, the bureaucrats or the bureaucracy doesn't widen the scope of the parliamentary democracy. The parliamentary democracy scope to be widened through the proper elections. Okay, the very functioning of the elections and all that, because there the electoral system is there. Okay, now this first statement seems to be incorrect one. It is an agency for strengthening the structure of federalism. When it comes to the concept of federalism, that is division of power, that is within union and the state. This union, between union and states, bureaucracy play an important role. That is, bureaucrats under all India services, they are the member of the union government, but serves for the states. Means they being appointed, they being recruited, they being selected by the union agency called Union Public Service Commission, but they being allotted a state cadre, and throughout their service life they had to serve the states. Sometimes they are termed as the agent of the center in the states. Okay, so no clear cut division is there. Okay, so it doesn't strengthen the structure of the federalism, rather than it weakens the very structure of the pure concept of federalism. And also we know that our constitution is not an pure federal constitution, it's a quasi federal constitution. Thus bureaucracy, that is the union bureaucracy, in any case doesn't strengthen the structure of the federalism. So this statement also seems to be incorrect. Again, the third one, that is political an agency for facilitating stability and economic growth. Got the point? So stability and economic growth. In the previous questions also we said that stability comes from the majority of the party in the lower house. The moment the concerned political party will enjoy the majority in the Lok Sabha, the government will be stable. If it doesn't enjoy the majority, n by 2 plus 1, the government has to go. It all depends upon the majority, and if government will be there, definitely the economic growth plans and policies will be at par to that. Okay, so this C statement also seems to be incorrect. Bureaucracy is an agency for the implementation of public policy. Yes, it is an implementing agency, as said over here. It implements the plans and policies made by the legislature. Got the point? Under the supervision of the temporary executives. So this statement seems to be the correct statement. So so the answer is D. I hope you must all be getting. Now let's move on to the next question. Now this question will be keeping in the easy format or the easy mode of question. Directly the question is asking in context to preamble to the constitution. Okay. So, we must be well aware of the concept of the preamble and the philosophies or the guidelines enhanced in the preamble to the Constitution of India, because it is one of the most important chapter in the entire Indian Constitution, polity and governance, because every section of the polity as well as the governance, even the Constitution has been pointed out, has been explained through the philosophies mentioned in the Constitution, that is 8 words, that is sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and justice, liberty, equity and fraternity. These 8 words are too important. It is going to be reflected throughout the Indian Constitution, polity and constitution. Okay. So, we must have to have the we can say deep analysis of these 8 words. Okay. Now, let us move on to the entire. That is why this preamble is also known as the mirror to the Constitution, introduction to the Constitution. Earlier this preamble was not the part of the Constitution, but later on, that is through Keswanand Bharati case, it had been made as a part of the Constitution. Okay. Now, make it a point. Number 1, that is it is a part of the Constitution, but has no legal effect. Okay. It is a part of the Constitution, but has no legal effect. Okay. Yes, this statement seems to be correct one, but again we will not have to stop over here, because it might be confusing. In examination we will have to go through entire options, because sometime in the questions the examiner do gives two answers. The one answers might be the correct one, the other might also be the correct one, but one of them must be the most appropriate one. So, we will have to go through the entire options first, then to decide upon which is the most appropriate one. So, the preamble is a part of the Constitution, but has no legal effect. Got the point? Second is not a part of the Constitution and has no legal effect either. Got the point? Now, the third one is a part of the Constitution and has the same legal effect as any other part. Got the point? And the D is a part of the Constitution, but has no legal effect independently of other part. Okay. So, over here we will say that here it is saying that not a part of the Constitution. Okay. I said that earlier it was not a part of the Constitution, but right now, since the verdict of the Keswanand Bharati case 1973, it had been made the part of the Constitution. So, B statement seems to be incorrect one. Okay. A part of the Constitution and has the same legal effect as any part of that one. Okay. So, has same legal effect as any other part of the Constitution. It means over here one of the most important characteristics of this preamble is that it does not have the legal effect on its own. Okay. For this legal effect, it has to be dependent on the other parts of the Constitution. Independently or individually, this preamble is not enforceable in the court of law, but in case of we can say that suppose if a case is pending in the court and there is a confusion, or we can say that there is a variation in the we can say, or there is a duplication in the case, the court has to go to the preamble to the Constitution, okay, and has to have the very philosophies of the preamble and then to decide upon the verdict. Okay. So, in case of any confusion, so independently it does not have any relevance, legal relevance. So, this statement also seems to be the incorrect one. Now, it is a part of the Constitution, but has no legal effect independently, as earlier I said that. Okay. So, this statement seems to be the correct one. Here the answer to be the D one. Got the point? Okay. Now, let us move on to the other one. Okay. So, again over here we will have to make it a point, and simply with reference to the provisions contained in part 4 of the constitution, part 4 of the constitution, simply try to remember part 4 of the constitution. Earlier also we had seen it is related with directive principles of the state policies of India. Which of the following statement is or are correct? So, number 1, let us look into that. They shall be enforceable by courts. No, directive principles of the state policies is not enforceable in the court of law. Got the point? They shall not be enforceable by any court. This statement seems to be correct, because the directive principles of the state policy is not enforceable in the court of law. The third statement, the principles laid down in this part are to influence the making of law by the state. Okay. So, what we saw in the previous questions, that when it comes to directive principles of the state policies, the state has to function on the ideals of the welfaristic orientation based on the socialist structure of the nation as well as the structure of the government. For the welfare of the larger section of the society, the government from time to time come out with plans and policies, and these plans and policies is there to favor the welfare of the citizens at the larger extent. Thus, whatsoever plans and policies the government is going to make in a rule, the rule is being influenced by the guidelines or the principles mentioned in the directive principles of the state policies. Thus, this statement also seems to be the correct one. So, 2 and 3 is there. So, over here D is there, that is 2 and 3 is correct over here. Okay. We can also use the elimination theory while solving the questions. The moment we saw that statement 1 is incorrect, simply we can go that wheresoever 1 is there, we must strike it down. So, only 50-50 is there, that is B and D is there. In that is second options already right. We have to go through the third one, and the third also seems to be the correct one. Thus, finally we are making D option as the correct option. Okay. So, this exercise in between we must have to do in the examination hall. Okay. So, this was like that. So, we will be making it into the moderate one as well as in easy also, because the basics of the directive principles of the state policy all must have to go through that. Got the point? Now, let us move on to the other question over here, that is question number 89. Now, over here again let us make it the point. Here, according to the Constitution of India, a person is eligible to vote can be made a minister in a state for 6 months, even if he or she is not a member of the legislature of that state. So, to be the minister or the part of the council of minister, one must be the member of the either house. Either house, it means when it comes to the parliament, that is parliament is bicameral in nature, that is lower house known as Lok Sabha and the upper house known as Rajya Sabha. When it comes to the state legislative legislature, some houses are of bicameral in nature, some are that is unicameral in legislation. That is unicameral means that is only one house, that is lower house. Bicameral means there also 2 houses exist. So, one who to be the member of the council of minister must be the member of either of the house. Got the point? But there is an option that one who is not a member of either of the house can also be the part of the council of minister as a minister, but has to be the member of the concerned house within 6 months of him being appointed as a minister. It means within 6 months from the date of his appointment as a minister, he must become the member of that particular house. So at max, without being the member of the house, one can be a minister, that is for a maximum duration of 6 months. But to be the member of the house, certain age eligibility criteria is there, whether in context to parliamentary elections or the state legislative elections. The minimum age required is 25 years to contest the election. Okay, minimum is, because when it comes to the upper house, that is upper house, there the 30 years is required in either of the house, in context to the parliament or in context to the state legislative assembly. Minimum age is 30 years, but in house, that is lower house, that is 25 years is required. So minimum is cutoff is 25 years. But when it comes to the eligibility to vote, the eligibility to vote is only of 18 years. One who is of 18 years do have the legal right to cast their vote. Okay. So as per this statement, it is saying that one who is eligible to vote can become the minister. This statement is contradictory, because one can cast the vote in 18 years but cannot be appointed as a minister over here, because for the minister he has to fulfill this eligibility criteria of 25 years in minimum. Got the point? So the very first statement seems to be incorrect. It means A and C is the wrong options. We have B, we have to choose between two. Okay. Statement, and let's see what the second statement is saying. Second statement says that according to the Representation of Peoples Act 1951, it means the statement is asking about the RP Act 1951, that a person convicted of a criminal offence and sentenced to imprisonment for 5 years is permanently disqualified from contesting an election even after his release from prison, which of the prison. Okay, so that is when it comes to the second statement, the RP Act 1951, it says that if a person has been convicted of a criminal offence and sentenced to imprisonment for 2 or more years, it means minimum 2 years and maximum what it can be depending upon the crime he has committed. It means it is for 5 years over here is there, it can be also. So on this basis only we cannot make it incorrect, but let's move on to the other part of this. Okay, disqualified from contesting an election even after his release. It means once he is released after fulfilling his verdict, imprisonment, then he totally seems to be disqualified and he cannot contest the election at all. But this is not the case. Once his prison period is over, thereafter up to 6 years he cannot contest any of the election. But post he has passed the phase of 6 years of his release, he can contest the election and can be the part of the house, either house. Got the point? So this second statement is incorrect. Second statement within the second statement is incorrect, second part of this statement, whereas up to certain extent the first part of the second statement can also be checked, that is 2 or more years. Got the point? So this statement seems to be incorrect one. So both statements are incorrect, thus option D seems to be the correct answer. Got the point? I hope it must be clear. Now let's move on to the next question. Question number 19, series C, that consider the following statement. The statement seems to be like that. Number 1, the President of India, it's about the President of India, can summon a session of the Parliament at such place as he or she thinks fit. Thus, it is there in the parliamentary proceedings there is a called summoning the session, that is summoning the session, proroguing the session, and dissolving the house. Dissolve means permanent prorogation, means once the tenure is over, or if any of the if the Lok Sabha do we can say that the government in the Lok Sabha loses its majority. In that case also it depends upon the President of India to dissolve the house, that is to suspend the house permanently, and the next election or the new election is the only means to start the house. Okay. This is also the act of the President, and the house for the session is to be called on by the President itself on the order, on the advice of the President only, that is the summoning of the house takes place. Okay. And this summoning of the house, the entire activities within the house is being that is taken care by the Speaker of the House, and during those period, that is the Speaker of the House or the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha do enjoys power to prorogue the sittings of the house. Okay. So this, yes, the President of India can summon a session of the Parliament at such place as he or she thinks fit. So very first statement is correct. Got the point? Now let's move on to the second statement. Here some printing mistakes are there. Okay. I hope only two statements had been made over here, and I'll be taking care of the third statement also, but let's look into that one. Printing mistake is there. Okay. Now the Constitution of India provides for 3 sessions of the Parliament in a year, but it is not mandatory to conduct all 3 sessions. Okay. So this is the second statement, and third statement starts from here. So the second statement is it talks about that the Constitution do provides the 3 sessions of the Parliament in a year. The statement seems to be incorrect. Why? Because in the Constitution it has been mentioned that the gap between 2 sessions must not exceed 6 months. It means minimum number of sessions to be called on is 2. The Constitution never ever had made in clarity that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 sessions to be called on. No, simply the line says that the minimum gap, simply the line says that the minimum gap between 2 sessions must not exceed 6 months. So the second statement is incorrect. Okay. Over here in the second statement itself, the line it is correct that, but it is not mandatory to conduct all 3 sessions. It is like that. But here this one provides for 3 sessions. This makes the second statement incorrect statement. Now the third statement, that there is no minimum number of days that a Parliament is required to meet in a year. Yes, no minimum number of days is required over there. The Parliament can sit in session for 20 days, 30 days, 40 days, or it may be as depending upon the work it has in that session. Okay. So no minimum number of days is required for that. Okay. Third statement seems to be the correct statement. So by going through this statement, we see barring 2, rest 1 and 3 statements seems to be the correct one. So 1 and 3, that is C is to be the correct answer. Got the point? Now let's move on to the next one. And 91, question number 91, that is third one, or we can say that C series. Consider the following statement. The question is in context to Aadhaar. Okay, and Aadhaar was in news and seems to be in news on various occasions. So it becomes one of the important. It can be connected through the current affairs also. Okay, so let's look into the entire issues and let's take care of this question. Aadhaar metadata cannot be stored for more than 3 months. Okay, so here says that the Aadhaar data cannot be stored for more than 3 months. This 3 months makes this statement incorrect because it is 6 months. In place of 3 months, it is 6 months. Thus, this statement seems to be the incorrect. Again, by going through the elimination process, we can say that being one incorrect statement, A and D seems to be the incorrect answer. So, only two choices is over here between B and C. We have to make it one most appropriate answer. Got the point? Now, let's look into that. The second statement, state cannot enter into any contract with private corporations for sharing of Aadhaar data. It means state has not any say in sharing of the Aadhaar data with the private corporations. See, here earlier it was correct that state was not having any right to share the Aadhaar data. Okay, but Justice Sikri case, in Justice Sikri case, it had been made that state do enjoys the power in context to share the Aadhaar data with private corporations also. So, let us move on over this, partially make it the correct one. Okay, let us look into the other options also. Okay. Third, that is Aadhaar is mandatory for obtaining insurance product. Yes, this is absolutely right that Aadhaar data is required, it is mandatory for obtaining any insurance product. Okay, you want to go for the insurance, okay, any kind of insurance, there the Aadhaar data is must. So, this statement, it means 3-1. So, 3 over here is there. So, we will have to make it the point again, we will have to make it more clear, because the fourth statement still is there. Aadhaar is mandatory for getting benefits funded out of the Consolidated Fund of India. In a recent statement, it was in news that for any of the benefit out of the Consolidated Fund of India, okay, the Aadhaar is required, it is mandatory. So, as per the current issues, we can say that this fourth statement also seems to be the correct one. Got the point? Now, so there is a confusion between second, third and fourth, because second is also correct, partially it is correct, at a moment of time it can be correct also, the third is also correct and the fourth is also correct. See, the fourth is correct, third is also correct, but no option is here that mention 3 and 4. If it would have been 3 and 4, definitely we must have go with that one, 3 and 4, but no, it is not like that. With 4, which statement is there? With 4, it is 2 is there, okay, and the second is also a kind of correct one as per the current analysis, current news. So, 2 and 4, thus we will leave third one and will go with 2 and 4, 2 and 4, but we can't say that we are going to avoid third one also. There seems to be some questions which answers is known by UPSC only. Even none of the institute, none of the faculty can clearly say that this is the most appropriate answer. If you ask to me, I will go with only 3. I will go with only 3. Most of the faculty, most of the learned person, most of the institutes, they might go for with 2 and 4. Some of them also go with only 3 is there. So, let us leave it on UPSC to decide whether it is B or C. That is why in answer we have given over there. Okay. So, in absence of the correct code over here, we can go for any B or C depending upon the luck what the UPSC do agree with it. Okay, got the point? Now, let us move on to the next question. That is question number 92 over here, and the question is about the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, the power of the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. At what moment, on what point the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha do shares equal power? Okay, that is Rajya Sabha has equal power with Lok Sabha in number 1, a matter of creating all India services. Okay, if we look into article 312 of the Constitution, there it has been mentioned that a resolution regarding creation of all India services need to be initiated in Rajya Sabha, and that to be passed by not less than 2/3 present and voting majority, then only the Lok Sabha can make law rules regarding the formation or the creation of All India Services. It means the bill regarding the creation of new All India Services can only be initiated in Lok Sabha. It cannot be presented in Rajya Sabha to begin with. The resolution regarding that has to first passed in Rajya Sabha. Lok Sabha do not enjoy the power to that one. Got the point? So here there is a difference between the power of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Here Rajya Sabha do enjoys the upper edge over the Lok Sabha. Thus this statement seems to be the incorrect one. Now the second statement, amending the constitution. Okay, when it comes to the amendment of the constitution, amendment cannot be solely enjoyed by the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha independently. Here it has to be passed by the Lok Sabha as well as the Rajya Sabha both. Got the point? Here they enjoys the equal power. Okay. So in that case this statement seems to be the correct one, but it doesn't correct one, but it doesn't means that we do not have to go through the other options. Let's look into the other options also. The removal of the government. When it comes to the removal of the government, it is not related with the Rajya Sabha at any cost. Whole and soul, the removal of the government is liable in the Lok Sabha only. The entire activities has to be played in the Lok Sabha only. That is, Rajya Sabha has nothing to do with the removal of the government, because the very collective responsibility of the Council of Ministers or the government lies with the Lok Sabha only. Got the point? So this statement seems to be the incorrect one. Now we have to go with the next one, that is making cut motions. Cut motions are related with the budgetary allocation. Budgetary allocations, or we can say it is related with the budget. Okay, and this budget seems to be the part and parcel of the Lok Sabha activity only. It is to be presented in the Lok Sabha, it is to be passed in the Lok Sabha. Here the Rajya Sabha do not enjoy the equal power with the Rajya Sabha. Okay, sorry, here the Rajya Sabha do not require the equal power with the Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha do have the upper edge over the Rajya Sabha in context to passing the budget. And this cut motion, that is three types of cut motions are there, and that is policy cut, token cut, and economy cut. Got the point? This is a chance for the member of the parliament to oppose the demand for grant presented by the government in the Lok Sabha. Got the point? So through this cut motions, the opposition or the other members can oppose the budget present demand of grants presented by the government, concerned government. Okay, so only it is being enjoyed in the Lok Sabha, not in the Rajya Sabha. So this statement also seems to be incorrect, and it is not. Here the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha are not equal. So only second statement is correct. So move over here. Got the point? So answer will be B. Now next, let's take a look on the next question. Next question is all about the MP led funds. Okay, during COVID-19 starting, it was in news. Why it was in news? Because we came to know in the beginning that this COVID-19 going to be extended for the long period. Thus it requires huge, we can say a sum of money is required to tackle or to handle this COVID-19, to maintain all those ill results of this COVID-19. Okay, so for the resources, some financial, to manage the financial crunch, we need to take care of all those things, misuse of the money and all that. Okay, so let's move over here. Now MP led fund, what it has been mentioned that is the government in the parliament had presented a bill regarding the suspension of the MP led fund for 2 years, that is for 2020-21 and 2021 and 22. Got the point? Second issue was, that is deduction of 30% in the salaries and the pensions of the member of the parliament as well as the ex-members of the parliaments respectively. In salary and pensions, deduction up to 30% of their salaries and all that. So, these two bills were there. Since MP-led fund had been suspended, thus it was in news and the UPSC has asked this question. And here the four statements are there, we will have to take care of that. Okay. MP-led fund means member of parliament's local area development schemes, that is for the development of the local areas. So, first statement is that MP-led funds must be used to create durable assets like physical infrastructure for health and education, and especially in context to local areas of their constituencies. Okay. Yes, it is correct. It is meant for the creation of the durable assets. Each MP do enjoys 5 crore rupees under MP-led fund for the development of the durable assets within their constituencies. Got the point? So, it is for that one. So, first statement seems to be the correct one. Second statement, a specified portion of each MP's funds must benefit SC/ST population. See, out of the entire fund, that is 15% to be exclusively spent on the SC's populations within that one, whereas 7.5% to be spent for the upgradation of the scheduled tribes population within the constituencies. Okay. So, this statement also seems to be the correct one, because the specified portion, this is 15% and 7.5% seems to be the specified portion of each MP's fund. This statement also seems to be the correct one. Now, the third statement, that is MP-led funds are sanctioned on yearly basis and the unused funds cannot be carried forward to the next years. So, yes, this MP-led funds to be sanctioned on yearly basis. That is why in the beginning itself I said that this year, that is for consequently 2 years, this MP-led fund had been suspended through a bill passed in the Lok Sabha. Got the point? So, on annual basis 5 crore rupees per annum is being allotted. So, the first part of this statement on yearly basis seems to be the correct one, and the unused funds cannot be carried forward to the next year. This statement seems to be incorrect, cannot seems to be the incorrect. Why? Because if MP has not been able to spend the funds allotted that year, he do or she do have the right to make it to carry forward for the next years. The fund, remaining funds to be carried forward, it can be carried forward for the next year. It will be in addition to the to that new fund. Okay. So, this statement of this part of this statement makes the entire statement incorrect. Got the point? Now, the next one, that is the district authority must inspect at least 10% of all works under implementation every year. Yes, that is, this statement seems to be correct one, because 10% of all works under implementation to be inspected by the district authority per annum on a yearly basis. Got the point? So, only third statement is incorrect. So, wheresoever the third one will be, that is to be incorrect, and 1, 2 and 4, 1, 2 and 4, that is option D seems to be the correct one. Got the point? Now, so this seems to be from the current basis. So, we will have to take care of all those things, the current issues, the current concepts that need to be taken care of. Now, let us move on to the next question. See, we have to take care of the fundamental rights in this question. The moment the fundamental rights do comes over here, automatically right from article Article 12 to, the moment fundamental rights comes in mind, Article 12 to Article 35 must come in one mind. Okay. But this question is not in context to articles, it is in context to the philosophy behind the fundamental rights. Let us take care of that one. Which one of the following categories of fundamental rights incorporates protection against untouchability, okay, as form of discrimination? Got the point? So, here I will be making it in the category of the simple question to this. Okay. No much we can say analysis is required over here, only a brief analysis is required over here. When it comes to untouchability, over here it means the very first right, that is right to equality. Untouchability, that is Article 17, and this Article 17 is the part of the very first right to equality, that is between Article 14 to 18. In between lies Article 17, and that 17 is in context to untouchability. Okay. Simply over here is that right against exploitation, no; right to freedom, no; right to constitutional remedy, no; right to equality, yes. This is the classification, this is the first fundamental rights in which protection against untouchability need to be taken care of. It is the one of the simple one, so will not be taking in analysis in totality, so you can understand properly. Okay, it is one of the simplest one. Now again, this is also one of the most simplest one, okay, because this I already had gone through in the explanation of the previous question, but again as a question, as a complete question, we will have to take care over here. In India, separation of judiciary from executive is enjoined by. Separation of judiciary from executive simply says that Article 50 has been in Article 50 it has been mentioned, that is separation of judiciary from executive, and this Article 15 lies in directive principles of the state policies, which comes between Article 36 to 51. Okay. So definitely we can easily say that it is with the directive principles of the state policies. Got the point? Separation of judicial from executive nowhere has been mentioned in the preamble, whereas the 7th schedule is related with the distribution of power between union and the state. Okay. Under 3 list, that is union list, state list and concurrent list, residuary power concepts do also comes in that one. So this is different one, 7th schedule. The conventional practice, it is also not like this. Simply the answer is very clear, that is directive principles of the state policies. Here the talks about the separation of judiciary from executive, and that too under Article 50 to the Constitution. It is one of the simplest question also. Okay. Let's move on to the other one. Now this is also the straightforward question, so we will not have to make it more analysis over here. Simply let us look into that. Along with budget, the finance minister also places other documents before the parliament, which includes the macroeconomic framework statement, that is macroeconomic framework statement. The aforesaid document is presented because this is mandated by long standing parliamentary conventions, no. Article 12, 112 and 110(1), no. Article 130, no. It is simply, that is provisions of the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 203, that is FRBM Act, FRBM Act 2003, which simply explains about the management of the finances in a proper way, okay, to minimize all, we can say that to minimize all misuse of finances in the statements. Okay, got the point? So over here this is the D1 is there. Now let us move on to other one. question number 97. That is, the constitutional government is defined, or a constitutional government by definition is, what is constitutional government? The moment I said constitutional government, constitution, what is constitution? It's a documents of people's faith and aspirations having legal sanctity. Legal sanctity. That is, legality is there. Legality is there. Legality means rule is there. Law is there. Law is there. Got the point? Rule and law is there. And there is a concept called rule of law. It means no of the person is above the rule of law. Who is supreme? Rule is supreme. Under the rule, everyone seems to be common and all that. It means both the state as well as the citizen within the state to be abide by the rule. It means state on its own cannot be autocrat, nor the individual within the state can be autocrat in its own. Both have to be managed by the rule, by the law, and that rule and law mentioned in the Constitution of India. It means the state is being bounded by the citizens, being cross-checked by the citizen. The state cannot act on its own, nor the citizens can act on its own, because citizens also has to follow the rules and regulations tendered in the Constitution. It means both need to be check and balanced with each other. The government by legislation, the statement is there, that is the constitutional government. Okay, government by legislature, yes, the government, the legislative or the parliamentary form of government already we do have. Okay, the popular government means famous government, multi-party government, yes, all is there. But the concept called limited government means the government do not enjoy free hand power to suppress the citizens at any cost on their own will. No, until and unless the citizen has not avoided the rules to follow. Got the point? So, this limited government concept favors the constitutional government. Thus, that is the D is the correct one. Got the point? Now, let us come to the next question, and the question is also about, again the question is also about the fundamental rights. Okay. Now, I want to make it clear after going through all this question, that is the syllabus of Indian Constitution, or we can say GS1, comprises of a component called, that is Indian Constitution, polity and governance. Okay? The moment it says Indian Constitution, it means talking about the articles, that is 1 to 395. The moment polity seems over here, it means the official structure or the government or the offices or the structure of the government. It means right from president to other offices over there, and the president, we can say parliament and other things over there. The governance means, that is the plans and policies made by this structure to be implemented through the act of the governance, that is implementing authority. The Constitution, the moment I said Constitution over here, from 1 to 395, the most important portion, it also can be classified into two parts separately, or three parts we can say that is between preamble, then article 1 to 51A, and then 52 to 395. This 352 to 395 of the Constitution, the article is directly related to the political concept or the structure of the government or the governmental structure, we can say that. But the very base to all the Constitution is article 1 to 51A. Actually, it is the core philosophy of the entire Constitution, and one must have to be mastered over here. And in that also, especially when it comes to fundamental rights, when it comes to directive principles of the state policies, and when it comes to fundamental duties, these three are one of the most important sections of the constitution. Until and unless you will not be having the command over these articles, over these sections, you will not be in a position to carry forward the other political knowledge, or the, we can say that the polity, you will not be in a position to command over this polity sections. Got the point? Because this is a kind of philosophy. Fundamental rights is what? It's a kind of philosophy of the constitution. Same with the directive principles of the state policies and the fundamental duties also. It's a kind of philosophy. Got the point? Constitutional philosophy, and that need to be clearly understood, because it does have impact in other part of the polity and the constitution too. Got the point? So here, that's why most of the questions are very near or directly from this preamble, fundamental rights, the DPSP and the fundamental duties. We are going through it. Okay. Now, fundamental rights. Over here said that other than fundamental rights, which of the following parts of Constitution of India reflects the principles and provisions of Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948? That is United Nations Human Rights Commission. Universal Declaration of Human Rights means in United Nations, especially on 10th December 1948, that is an agreement had been signed with the member states, and in that India was also one of the signatory authority, and there India has signed a declaration, and that is in context to serve the society at the larger extent wheresoever the concept of human rights is there. India being the signatory authority under this human right, there in United Nations some approximately 50 on 50 points, 50 points, the agreement was there that these are the rights being tendered to the human, not the citizen but the humans throughout the world, and that need to be followed by each and every nation as well as the government whosoever is there the part of the United Nations. So on the basis of that, to serve those rights, the in Constitution, by going through the Bill of Rights of United States of America, the Indian Constitution has pointed out 7 fundamental rights in the beginning, but right now we do have 6 fundamental rights. Each fundamental rights means the basic human rights. Again, want to make it clear, that is, what is the fundamental rights? It's the basic human rights. The human rights which are basic in nature is being termed as the fundamental rights. Okay. So again, in fundamental rights also we are talking about the human rights itself, but that human rights which are of basic in nature. So while going through the entire fundamental rights right from article 14 to 35, we will see that we are covering 36 to 38 rights, human rights which are basics in nature, and the remaining rights are still to come in the constitutional format under the fundamental rights. Right now we do have the very declaration for the right to have internet access, okay, that is right to privacy, etc. These all are what? These all are the basic human rights, but they are not the part of the fundamental rights, but they are very willing to be the part of that. In the coming future, they can be the part of the fundamental right also. Just like the right to education earlier was not the part of the fundamental right, but with amendment it had been made the part of the fundamental rights, and right now it is one of the fundamental right. Got the point? So these human rights, that is how far the fundamental rights is related with human rights or human rights with the fundamental rights. So let's move over here. That is preamble. Okay. So preamble, again we said that preamble is all about 8 words, most important words. Okay, it is sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic, justice, liberty, equity, fraternity. So the last 4, justice, liberty, equity and fraternity, that is the state or the government of that state do have the accountability and the responsibility to ensure all its citizens justice, liberty, equity and fraternity. It means it is the very accountability of the state to ensure justice, liberty, equity and fraternity to all its citizens. That is, citizens means humans, humans means it is the human right, it is related with the human rights. Thus, preamble do also related with the rights of the humans. to be enjoyed by that one. Got the point? So, this can be also one of the important provisions, principles and the provisions. Next comes to directive principles of the state policies. Under this directive principles of the state policy, it is the duty of the state to provide such policies which are mandatory for the welfare of the citizens of that nation, for the welfare of the humankind. Got the point? So, on this focus, the directive principles of the state policy also seems to be one of the principles and the provisions which is going to take care of the human rights. Beside this, the fundamental duties. Here, if we look into the issue, fundamental rights, okay, that is basic human rights, DPSP is in a kind of guidelines, that is the basis on which the government makes rules and regulations for the welfaristic orientation, whereas fundamental duties, it's a kind of moral obligation. What is moral obligation on part of the citizens or the humans, that the patriotism within themselves must be alive, so that they can take care of the nation as well as other humans within the territory of that nation. Okay. So, that is to enhance the social culture, to enhance the unity in diversity, okay, to respect, to pay homage to the nation India through the means of that is patriotism. Okay. So, it cannot be separated at all or individually when it comes to human rights. Okay. So, when it comes to principles and the provisions, all these three, whether preamble, whether fundamental rights, because here said that other than fundamental rights, it means fundamental rights is also included. Got the point? So, fundamental rights, the preamble, the DPSP and the fundamental duties, all will be there. Okay. So, 1, 2 and 3. 1, 2 and 3. Got the point? I hope you must got it. Now, the next one, I hope this is the last question of this segment, Indian polity. In India, legal services authorities provides free legal services to which of the following types of citizens? Got the point? When it comes to free legal services for the sake of mankind, that is in directive principles of the state policies, a new article had been added known as Article 39 Clause A, through 42nd Amendment Act 1976. And the very purpose of adding this Article 39A is to make provisions for providing free legal services to the needy person, or we can say that weaker section of the society, or the one who comes under the underprivileged class of society. We do know well who comes under the underprivileged class of society, that is the SCs, the STs, okay, women, child, old age peoples, okay, old peoples, then transgenders, handicapped, they all comes under the underprivileged class society. So for their wellness, for their support, so that they cannot miss the opportunity to enjoy the legal aid only because they are not rich or they are suffering from the economic crunches. Okay. So there is a concept called justice. Justice must be ensured to all its citizens, irrespective of religion, race, caste, creed, sex, place of birth. Okay. Justice must be ensured. None of the individual of this nation be avoid of getting justice if he is not economically sound. So to handle this, there is a provisions added in the constitution under Article 39A, there is provisions to provide free legal services. For that, that is National NALSA, NALSA. NALSA had been established under Legal Services Authorities Act 1987, which got further amended in 2002. In that, as I said, that weaker section and underprivileged class society is being mentioned over there. In that, certain provisions had been mentioned that who all to be eligible to get the legal services, and that is free. Okay. So, let us look into that. Number 1, person with an annual income of less than 1 lakh will be eligible to get free legal services. Okay. Statement seems to be correct, but behind this various provisions are there. Not all persons to get free legal services whose income are up to 1 lakh rupees or less than 1 lakh rupees. Okay. This criteria has been mentioned or differentiated. It depends upon state to state, state to state. In some state this is 1 lakh, in some state it is more than 1 lakh, 2 lakh or 3 lakh or 4 lakh, depending upon the economic parity of the states. Okay. Per capita income of that state, the income of that state. So, it goes differently, but yes, in context to state the minimum is 1 lakh, thus we cannot say that, that is, this statement seems to be incorrect one. Got the point? But yes, again if we look into that, in context to some union territories, just like we can say that Dadar and Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu, it is only 15,000, whereas in context to Lakshadweep it is only 9,000. The limitation is 9,000. Got the point? But it differs from state to state and union territories to territories, but yes, 1 lakh is the minimum criteria for that. Okay. Let us make it in weighting, statement in weighting to make it correct or incorrect. Got the point? Second, transgenders with an annual income of less than 2 lakh. I said weaker section of the society or underprivileged class persons in this society, there the transgenders are also the part of that. Okay. In context to transgender. So, when it comes here, there is a doubt that in India it is mentioned over there, but not in all perspective, but only in context to Delhi. Delhi Legal Services Authority, there this statement seems to be correct in context to Delhi. Okay. There is a separate Delhi Legal Services is there. So, Delhi Legal Services Authorities is there, who has mentioned this point that in Delhi, National Capital Territory, the parliament has made a rule that it is one who is a transgender and has the income less than 2 lakh per annum will be liable to get free legal aid, not prevalent in other states, especially cases there. But since it is in Delhi and made by parliament, thus we cannot make it incorrect. Okay. So, still this statement also to be in weighting. Got the point? Now, member of other backward classes with an annual income of less than rupees 3 lakh. The moment I said OBC other backward classes, this makes this statement totally incorrect, because here only SC, ST, women, yes, that is why in the beginning itself I said that who do all comes under the underprivileged class of society, then children, then comes old age peoples and the transgenders. Got the point? So, especially for OBC, no such provisions is there anywhere mentioned in the rule book. Got the point? So, this statement is totally incorrect. Then by making it incorrect, wheresoever 3 is there, we will be striking it out, 3 and 3. Got the point? Then we will come over here, all senior citizens. Since senior citizens are the part and parcel of the underprivileged class society, but here that is not equally all senior citizens will be getting these provisions in every state. It also depends upon state to state. Okay. That is, this statement all senior citizens will be in relations to statement 1, person with annual income, that is whosoever will be the senior citizen, okay, and will be having the income less than 1 lakh as per the state's criteria. In states where it is 3 lakh, there all senior citizens with 3 lakh or less than that income will be liable in that particular state. So, this statement is in consultation with this one. Got the point? So, if we look into the options mentioned over here, then this, if it would have been 1, 2 and 4, this would have been the correct answer. But no, 1, 2 and 4 is there. Either it is 1 and 4 or 1 and 2. So, definitely A or D, any of the answers can be correct. So, we will have to judiciously leave it on to the Union Public Service Commission to make it out which options the UPSC is going to take. Okay. So, on 2 questions we are here directly to have faith on UPSC that whether it is A or D or A or C, it depends upon that one. Got the point? So, here it this is going to vary from institute to institute, faculty to faculty, discussions. Okay. Lastly, the word will be with the UPSC. Got the point? So, while going through all these questions, we have come through the discussions of Indian constitution, polity and governance. Got the point? So, what we saw over here, that out of these 17 questions, 14 to 15 questions, we do expect that every candidate who had appeared for this examination recently or the future aspirants who are trying to be the part of this services, the reputed services, they must work up to the extent that they can solve with awareness this at least 14 to 15 question out of 17 question. That is in percentage, if we look into that, that is 92 to 95%, we must have the ability to solve the questions in polity. If we look into the issue that if we are taking care of the 15 questions, then I said in the beginning that we will be talking about the expected cutoff this year. As per myself, the cutoff is going to be 98 plus minus 3. It means right from 95 to 100 marks, anywhere it can lie over there. But what I said that it will be minus 3, in rare case it is going to be plus 3. Got the point? So, near about, because we do have to give the range, because we do not have the licensing with the UPSC that we can accurately know that what is the cutoff going to be. But yes, we can be very near to that. Okay. So, suppose if 95 to 100 question is 100 marks is there, it means that is 47 to 50 question is there. Out of, suppose if 47 question is there and 17 questions comes from Indian polity, it means you have to work only for 30 questions to make it correct. Okay. Once you do have the command over the Indian polity, constitution and governance, okay, you have an easiness of such kind, definitely the other portions you have to make it only 30 to 35 questions to clear this preliminary examination. Okay, that is why in the beginning itself that it does enjoys the lion's share in clearing the prelims examination. Okay. So, hope you have enjoyed this discussion a lot, and now that is all my best wishes to those who are going to clear this examination and writing the mains this year. Beside this, I will also be giving the best wishes for those who anyhow could not get clear this prelims examination, but will be in a position to write this examination next year with full zeal and confidence, because Indian polity is going to assist you in terms of sailing out through this prelims examination and writing the mains. Beside this, I would also like to we can say welcome those peoples, those aspirants, those students who are willing to be the part of this preparation, and I welcome them all. No need to worry at all. This is one of the easiest section only once when you become aware of the entire topics mentioned in that. Be aware, be alert, the entire polity will be yours. And as a citizen of this nation, as an aware person, at least you must be well aware of your right, your we can say that functioning of the government, okay, that is how the policies plans are being implemented. So as aware citizens, you must be well aware of all those things and the knowledge and all that. Okay. So all the very best wishes to you all. Thank you.